What if you couldn't take a shower without your heart racing? What if going to the toilet meant bracing yourself for an interruption, an accusation, or a demand that could not wait 5 minutes? What if the simple act of laying down to sleep triggered anxiety because you knew it wouldn't be allowed to last? You live with a knot in your chest just thinking about sleep. Rest becomes risky. Privacy becomes selfish. Sleep becomes something you steal rather than something you deserve. You start to feel like your own body is a luxury you can't afford, and that exhaustion you carry isn't just tiredness, it's the weight of never being allowed to fully exist without interference. There's a shame that creeps in, a voice that whispers, "Am I not even allowed to sleep?" And the answer terrifies you because somewhere deep down, you already know it's no. That is the topic of today's episode. We're going to explore liberty deprivation, a tactic that targets the most fundamental aspects of human functioning. We'll start by defining what liberty deprivation really is and why abusers use it to destabilize their victims. Then we'll break it down into two of the clearest ways abuser weaponize this. This isn't all the ways, this is just two that we're going to pick up in this episode. That's sleep deprivation as punishment and toilet interruption. We'll look at how this impacts men specifically, the shame and the confusion that follows, and the tools you can use to protect yourself and reclaim your basic human dignity. And for those of you who are new here, this is Stand Again, a lived experience platform for male victims of family violence. Abuse is not limited to one gender, but this channel focuses on the male perspective because it is so often dismissed or misunderstood. And if this content helps you, please like and subscribe and type the words Stand Again in the chat. Those two words might just help another man find his. And your engagement also helps push this overlooked reality into visibility. Liberty deprivation is the systematic denial of basic bodily autonomy. That's sleep, rest, privacy, and personal space, which is stripped away through constant interruption, intrusion, and interference. Your most fundamental human needs become weapons of control turned against you to create chronic destabilization. Abusers do this because exhaustion makes you easier to control. When you're operating from chronic sleep deprivation, your emotional regulation collapses. Your judgment becomes clouded. Your boundaries weaken. Your ability to think clearly about the relationship diminishes because your brain is constantly under stress. The abuser gains power through your physical and mental depletion. Your body never fully relaxes. You develop dread around the most basic acts of self care. Taking a shower becomes an exercise in speed rather than restoration. Going to bed means waiting for the inevitable interruption. You start to feel guilty for having bodily needs, like you're being selfish just for wanting to sleep or use the toilet in peace. You begin to rush through the most fundamental aspects of living because you know they will be weaponized against you. But here's where the gaslighting deepens the damage. When you notice these patterns and try to name them, the abuser flips the script. You're told you're lazy for needing sleep. You're called selfish for wanting privacy. You're accused of being dramatic for asking to use a bathroom without interruption. The violations themselves become evidence of your weakness, your demands, your failure to appreciate what they do for you. This reframing traps you in shame, making you question whether your basic human needs are actually unreasonable demands. Today, we're going to explore only two particular types of liberty deprivation, that's sleep deprivation and toilet interruption, because these two particular types are the most psychologically destructive. Let's first take a look at sleep disruption as punishment. Sleep disruption is weaponized exhaustion. It's a deliberate denial of rest through a calculated pattern of interference that breaks your ability to recover, think clearly, or maintain emotional balance. Within abusive dynamics, your sleep becomes conditional. It depends on their mood, their needs, or their perception of whether you've earned the right to rest. You might be woken before dawn with accusations, demands, or arguments that just cannot wait. You might find yourself lying in bed, heart pounding, because you know that at any moment could bring an explosion of anger, a demand for attention, or a crisis that requires your instantaneous response. This tactic plays out through strategic timing. You're woken when you're most vulnerable, when your defenses are down, when you can't think straight. They might storm into the room with urgent accusations about something you supposedly did weeks ago. They might demand you solve problems, answer questions, or engage in emotional labor before you are even fully conscious. And if you don't respond immediately or adequately, that becomes evidence of your dismissiveness, your selfishness, or your failure as a partner. The impact builds slowly. Your body stops trusting that rest will ever be allowed. You develop hypervigilance at bedtime, waiting for the next interruption. You start to sleep lightly, half listening for sounds that might signal another confrontation, that might signal your nervous system to wake up as quickly and as fully as you possibly can. Your nervous system never fully switches off because it's learned that sleep is not safe. The exhaustion compounds daily, and with it, your ability to regulate your emotions, set boundaries, or think clearly about what's happening deteriorates. But sleep disruption damages more than just your energy levels. It erodes your sense of your own strength and capacity. When you can't stay alert at work, when you forget simple tasks, when you struggle to follow conversations, you start to believe you are weak, incompetent, failing. The abuser doesn't need to tell you that you're useless when chronic exhaustion is already whispering it in your ear. Sleep deprivation becomes the invisible hand that makes you doubt your own capability, while the person causing it positions themselves as a strong, functional one holding everything together. What makes this particularly damaging is the framing. If you complain about being tired, you're told you are lazy. If you ask for uninterrupted sleep, you're accused of being selfish or uncaring. The abuser positions your need for rest as optional, while their need for access to you becomes absolute. Your exhaustion becomes proof that you can't cope, rather than evidence that you are being systematically denied the conditions necessary to basic functioning. Next, we'll look at toilet interruption. The bathroom represents one of the last remaining spaces of privacy and bodily autonomy. It's where you care for yourself without performance, where you exist without observation, where your body needs take precedence. But within abusive relationships, even this sanctuary becomes a target for invasion and control. Toilet interruption is about intrusion at your most vulnerable moment. The tactic operates through repeated violations of your privacy, timed precisely when you're most exposed and unable to defend yourself or leave the situation. It's about ensuring that no moment of your day is free from potential conflict or demand. This shows up as persistent knocking at the toilet door while you're trying to use it, often accompanied by demands that you respond immediately to non urgent questions. You might hear your name being called from across the house, only to discover there was no real emergency when you rush on out. The bathroom door might even be rattled or opened without permission, with the excuse that I just need something that just could not wait. Your time in the bathroom becomes a countdown rather than a moment of peace. The humiliation here cuts deep. Toilet interruption robs you of dignity, turning the most private bodily functions into moments of control and shame. You're reduced to defending your right to basic privacy, explaining why you need 5 minutes alone, justifying the lock on the bathroom door. The abuser transforms your most intimate moments into opportunities for power and intrusion. The psychological impact compounds daily. You start to rush through basic self care, cutting short the few minutes you have to yourself because you know an interruption is coming. You develop anxiety around using the toilet or taking a shower because these moments have become associated with conflict, intrusion, or even accusations. Your body's natural rhythms become sources of stress rather than relief. For men, there's an added layer of ridicule when you try to explain this to others. Mate, what do you mean she interrupts you while you're on the toilet? The laughter that follows these conversations teaches you that this violation sounds petty to matter, too trivial to be abuse. But that dismissal deepens your silence and isolation, leaving you trapped in a reality that others can't or won't quite understand or acknowledge. The confusion this creates is quite intentional. You're left questioning whether you're being unreasonable for wanting privacy during intimate moments. You're told that locked doors are suspicious, that taking time for yourself is selfish, that your need for personal space indicates you are hiding something or you're avoiding your responsibilities. The abuser reframes your basic bodily autonomy as a privilege they can grant or withdraw rather than your fundamental right. Liberty deprivation hits men in ways that society rarely acknowledges or validates, precisely because it targets needs that men are actually culturally taught to minimize or ignore. You're socially conditioned to push through tiredness, to treat rest as weakness, to endure discomfort without complaint. This creates the perfect cover for abuse that weaponizes exhaustion and intrusion. When your sleep is repeatedly disrupted, when your privacy is constantly violated, you minimize it because that's what men are expected to do. You tell yourself you should be stronger, that you should handle the interruptions, that maybe you are being too sensitive about needing personal space. Meanwhile, society mocks men who want privacy or dignity around bodily functions, dismissing these needs as weakness or vanity. The cultural message is clear: real men don't need comfort, rest, or personal boundaries. The shame around liberty deprivation runs particularly deep for men because it strikes at fundamental concepts of autonomy and strength. You're supposed to be in control of your environment, your time, and your space. When those basic controls are stripped away through constant interruptions and intrusions, it challenges core aspects of the male identity. You begin to feel emasculated by your inability to protect yourself from something as simple as being woken up or interrupted when you're in the bathroom or shower. What you think is stoicism is actually systemic erosion. You're taught to frame endurance as strength. So when you push through chronic sleep deprivation and constant intrusion, you believe you're being resilient. But this isn't normal male toughness. This is abuse, conditioning you to accept the unacceptable, to treat your basic human needs as negotiable, to mistake survival for strength. If you are currently experiencing liberty deprivation, I encourage you to take a look at the exit planning page on my website at www.standagain.com.au. Safely exiting this situation should be your first plan. If you can't exit straight away, then you need to protect yourself. This requires recognizing that your basic needs are not negotiable while navigating the reality that directly confronting this abuse will most likely, at least in my personal experience, escalate the danger. You first need to create micro pockets of protected rest when possible. If you can sleep in a separate room without triggering retaliation, do so. If you can establish routines that make interruption harder to justify, build those quietly. Sometimes this means timing your rest around their schedule or finding moments when they're occupied elsewhere. This isn't surrender. This is strategic protection of your basic needs within dangerous constraints while you prepare your exit. Also, build discrete support networks. Connect with others who understand liberty deprivation as abuse, whether through trauma informed coaches such as myself or other men who have experienced similar situations. Having someone validate that these violations are real and damaging helps to counter the gaslighting that frames your basic needs as unreasonable demands. When you are finally free from abuse, recovery begins with the basics: reclaiming sleep and privacy. These are not luxuries, they're the foundations of being human. Yet, after living in hypervigilance, your body doesn't trust them straight away. Healing means consciously rebuilding these rhythms, restoring your relationship with your body signals, giving yourself permission to lie down without bracing for interruption. For many men, the instinct is to rush straight into productivity after escape, treating rest as laziness. But relearning rest without fear is part of undoing the damage the abuse caused. This process takes deliberate practice. You can create new safety cues in your environment, like locked doors, calming routines before bed, or gentle background sounds like rain or white noise to remind your nervous system that this space is yours. In time, your body begins to believe it again. Don't measure progress too harshly. A full night's sleep may take time to return, but every step towards resting without fear is a step into recovery. Needing rest is a human right. Wanting privacy is normal. Requiring time to care for your body without interference is fundamental human dignity. These are not privileges to be earned or failings to be corrected. Recovery from liberty deprivation is not about grand gestures. It starts with small, steady acts that remind your body it is safe again. Sleeping through the night without flinching at every sound, taking a shower without rushing, sitting in your own space and knowing it won't be interrupted. These are not trivial things. They're the first signs of freedom returning. As safety rebuilds, so does trust in yourself. You begin to listen to your body's signals again: hunger, tiredness, the need for space, and honor them without guilt. What was once weaponized against you becomes a guide back to presence and dignity. The deeper healing is recognizing that rest, privacy, and peace were never privileges to be granted to you. They're your right. They belong to you. And reclaiming them is reclaiming yourself. This is Stand Again, lived experience platform for male survivors of family violence. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Your voice might just help another man find his. If you're looking for one on one support, you can book coaching with a member of the Stand Again team. Simply visit standagain.com.au, where you will also find grounded information on surviving and recovering from family violence as a man. As always, remember that no matter how many times you've been knocked down, you can stand again.